Google Cloud Platform provides a rich array of network topology features that provide different blends of separation and isolation and communication and sharing. The least secure design is where everything is in a single failure domain and all the parts communicate and depend directly on one another. There are many ways of separating those parts and providing more private or tolerant communication channels between them, creating multiple failure domains and therefore better isolation. In submarine design, the parts of the submarine are divided into compartments that can be sealed off from one another. This helps with reliability because one compartment can flood and be sealed off from the rest, but it also helps with security because if an attacker gains entry to one compartment, it can be sealed off to limit the damage.
So then let's go a little bit deeper. So resource sharing and isolation. Now in this case, sharing enables collaboration between parts, where isolation prevents the compromise of one part from spreading to the others. So this is what we like about a microservice. So this way it's not really communicating with other services, it can only hand off, it can't compromise. If you're in an exploited one machine, you can't get into the others. So one way to do this is, say, isolating through virtual private cloud. So if you have two different projects that need to talk to each other, in this case, you can isolate the two networks from each other. So this way, they'll have their own private IP space, private security mechanisms, and its own identity access management. So any user here can't make actual changes to this network. Even though they're capable of communicating over the network, they may not have authentication capabilities to do so. Then there is IP address isolation using VPN tunneling. So in this case, we now can have an encrypted link between two multiple projects. This doesn't have to be in the cloud. This can also be in on-premise. But here, if we want projects to talk to each other privately, they can use another private IP address subnet space to increase the privacy and the encrypted communications between the two. But we also do encrypt communications between all services, actually. But in this case here, you'll have more granular control over that encryption policy. Then we have a new feature called cross-project virtual private cloud network peering. We used to call this cross-project networking, but the names keep changing. In this case, this allows us to directly connect two projects together using a private IP address, RFC 1918 if you want to be specific, private address space. And then in this case here, I believe that this is, sorry, we have a duplicate slide here. No, actually, I'm sorry. The difference here is we have different organizations. So you could have two different companies, two different organizations. So say you're contracting with an outsourcing firm who's developing stuff, but you don't want to give their users access to your project. So you could, again, do a cross-project networking through different organizations. They may be able to communicate. Then you can set identity access controls, etc., on what kind of communication can occur between these two particular domains. And then, of course, there's the shared private cloud. In this case here, you can have different virtual private clouds with their own projects. And here they use that cross-project networking, which will allow them to communicate. So you actually create a separate project for this. And this project is responsible for allowing all of this inter-project communication to exist. So this is really handy if you have single server providers that need to provide access to different projects. You want to isolate them, but you still want to allow them to communicate on a private subnet network without having to go over the public internet. And then there's more isolation. So what you can do is you can isolate based on the virtual NIC. So each of virtual machines can now handle up to 8 private NICs. And so every time you have another NIC, you can actually have a private subnet that's connected to them. So some applications may retrieve data incoming on one subnet, but actually communicate with another. So almost kind of like a DMZ in this case, in which if you're going to get through, this is kind of the proxy if you want to be able to communicate with that other network. This is also good for software-defined security applications. So say you install something from our cloud launcher, and it's a security system which will examine and inspect all incoming traffic, and perhaps it will do some intrusion detection, and then it will send it onto the network. So these oftentimes there are applications that require multiple virtual NICs to represent their appliances that they have available in the real world. So what if we want to access the GPC services over an internal IP? Well, that's now available because this was some of the concerns that somebody says, hey, I have a compute engine, But what I'd like to do is I want to access Google Cloud Storage, but it's going to be internal only. It should never be exposed, and neither should this compute engine. So why do I have to use a public IP? Well, now with private networking, actually when you set up your private networks, you can enable private Google Cloud access. So this way you never have to expose your services to the public internet. So let me give you a quick example here. If we go to the Google Cloud Console, and then we'll scroll down to VPC networking, and then we're going to go ahead and let's do a VPC network. So you can only do this on VPC creation. So when you're creating a VPC network, this is going to be your own private subnet. Notice here, there's the section for private Google access. We'll zoom in on here, and you have to enable that. You can't enable that after the fact. Maybe that will change in the future. Before, when we used to allow API scopes when VMs are created, you couldn't change those after the VM was created, but they found a way to do it. Now they do. So perhaps this will be changeable in the future, but just know before you set up your network and go down that route, if you do intend to do private service access, you'll want to do so by enabling it on the network creation.